Not yet. A story about waiting, wanting, and the timing that belongs to God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. She had been on 41 first dates in 2 years. 41, she kept a journal, not intentionally. She had started it as a way to process the first few, and then it became a record, and then it became something she occasionally read out loud to her best friend on the phone, while both of them alternated between laughter and genuine concern. The journal had sections, not organized sections, organic ones developed over time. There was the immediately no section, there was the fine but no section. There was the why would you say that out loud section. And there was occupying only one entry but an entire emotional chapter of its own, a section she titled with a single word, Donovan. She had not titled any of the others. Her name is Imani Brooks. She is 34 years old, a pediatric occupational therapist in Atlanta, Georgia, who is warm and funny and perceptive, and by any reasonable external assessment, the kind of woman who should have no difficulty finding a genuinely good partner. She had found 41 first dates and one Donovan. The Donovan entry is the reason this story exists. Before we move forward with the story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help us to grow this channel to uplift more people. Imani Brooks grew up in Decatur, Georgia, in a household full of people who laughed loudly and had opinions about everything and made meals that took most of the day and were worth every minute. She was the second of 3 children, a middle kid who had developed the middle child skill of reading rooms and finding the angle that worked, which translated professionally into an extraordinary gift for reaching children who had been hard to reach, and personally into a social ease that people described accurately as warmth. She was 32 when she downloaded her first dating app. She had been in 2 serious relationships before that, one in her mid-20s that had been good and had ended because of geography and the mutual sad recognition that love is sometimes not enough on its own, and one at 30 that had been less good and had ended because the man in question had been significantly more interested in the idea of Imani than in Imani herself, a distinction she had taken 11 months to identify and 3 months to act on. She was not a woman who entered the apps desperate. She was a woman who had tried the organic way, friends of friends, church, the occasional introduction, and had found the options limited in the specific way that the options are always limited when you are a professional woman in your 30s in a city where the ratio of remarkable women to available men who are actually ready for something real is stubbornly unfavorable. She downloaded the first app on a Sunday evening after her best friend Tamara said, "Imani, you are beautiful and brilliant and 32, and you are going to dry up waiting on God to drop someone through your ceiling." Imani had laughed. She would later revisit this conversation. Year 1 was educational. There was Brandon, who showed up 40 minutes late and explained that he had not realized the reservation was at a specific time, which prompted the question of what he had thought a reservation was. There was Kevin, who spent the first 45 minutes of the date describing his ex-wife in such forensic detail that Imani developed a specific, clear picture of a woman she had never met and privately took her side on every incident described. There was Deshaun, who was objectively lovely and with whom the conversation was easy and warm, and who at the end of the evening said he had to be honest with her. He was not over someone, he was working on it. He just wanted to be upfront. She had appreciated the honesty and grieved the timing for about a week. There was Jordan, who was fine on the date and then sent 17 texts between 10 p.m. and midnight that covered topics including his financial philosophy, his thoughts on Imani's neighborhood, and a detailed accounting of what he thought their children would look like. On a first date, they had not discussed children. She had not responded. She told Tamara about Jordan on the phone at 1 a.m, and they laughed until it stopped being funny and then kept laughing because that was the only appropriate response. Year 2 was when the pattern began to shift from educational to exhausting. The dates were fine, most of them, but there was a specific fatigue that accumulated. The repetition of the opening conversation, the assessment, the decision, the communication of the decision or the receipt of the decision, the reset. over and over. With the additional layer of the curated self-presentation of apps, the photographs that were slightly better than reality, the bios that described a life slightly more interesting than the one being lived, the first message dynamic that rewarded wit over substance. She began to feel, after certain dates, not just disappointed, but subtly reduced, as if the accumulation of encounters with people who were not quite right was doing something to her sense of what she deserved, as if her standards were being negotiated down by the sheer weight of repetition. She talked about this with her pastor, Pastor Jerome Caldwell of Riverside Seventh-day Adventist Church in Decatur. He was 62, patient, and had the gift of saying things plainly without making them feel simple. He said, "The wrong person at the right time is still the wrong person, and the right person at the wrong time." He paused. Well, that one's more complicated. She had thought about that for weeks. Then she went on another date, and then another, and then she matched with Donovan. His profile was, in retrospect, a masterclass in the construction of attractive fiction. The photographs were excellent. He was objectively attractive, tall, with the groomed, polished appearance of someone who understood that a photograph was a first impression and had invested accordingly. The bio was articulate and specific enough to seem genuine. He worked in finance, he read literary fiction, he had a dog named Archie, whose photograph was included because men who post photos with their dogs understand the algorithm. He said he was looking for something real and tired of the surface-level culture of modern dating. This, she would learn, was his most sophisticated lie. He messaged her first. The message was specific. It referenced something from her profile that most people scroll past, a line about her work with children that she had written in the 5 minutes before going to bed and not thought much about. He said it was the thing that had made him stop scrolling. He asked a thoughtful follow-up question. She responded. They texted for 10 days, long, substantive texts, the kind that suggested an actual interior life and the ability to engage with another person's thoughts. He was clever. He was curious about her. He asked good questions and gave good answers. He made her laugh. She told Tamara she was cautiously optimistic. Tamara said cautiously is doing a lot of work in that sentence. They made a dinner reservation for a Thursday at a restaurant in Buckhead that he chose, and that was, she noticed, nicer than any of the 40 previous venues. She arrived on time. He was already there. He stood when she arrived, which nobody had done before. The first 30 minutes were everything the 10 days of text had suggested they would be. Then something changed. She noticed the first thing when the server came to take their order. Donovan did not look at the server, not a glance. Genuinely did not make eye contact, did not acknowledge his presence as a person, spoke the order in the direction of the table as if the server were a mechanism rather than a human being. When the server asked a clarifying question about preparation, Donovan repeated his order at the same volume with the specific intonation of someone who finds the question unnecessary. Imani looked at the server, a young man, probably 23, who received this with the practiced neutrality of someone who had been a server long enough to have seen this before, and said, "Thank you so much," with specific, deliberate warmth. Donovan did not notice. He moved back to the conversation without acknowledging the interruption, which meant he did not experience it as an interruption. She made a note of this. One data point. The next thing was small and was also not small. She mentioned her work, a specific child she had been working with that week, a 4-year-old with sensory processing challenges who had made a breakthrough that had made her cry in her car from happiness. She told the story with the full body investment she brought to things she loved, which was one of the things people noticed about her and found magnetic. Donovan waited a beat after she finished and then said, "So I've been thinking about doing something different with my investment portfolio." Not a transition, not a bridge, just his topic, installed into the space where her story had been. She pulled back slightly, recalibrated. 2 data points. By the end of the main course, she had noted, he had spoken about himself for approximately 70% of the conversation, and the 30% that was nominally about her had been questions that were actually setups for him to return to himself. He had interrupted her 4 times. He had corrected her twice on topics about which she was significantly more informed than he was. once about child development, and once about a restaurant she had recommended, which he had not been to, but had heard something about from someone. He spoke about his previous relationship in terms that centered exclusively on what the other person had done wrong, with a specificity and a fluency that suggested this was a well-rehearsed monologue. She was managing, she was polite, she was giving him the benefit of the charitable interpretation at every turn because she had arrived with optimism, and she was not the kind of person who abandoned a situation without giving it a real chance. Then came the comment. He had asked, finally, a question about her, what her long-term goals were. She had answered honestly she wanted to continue her clinical work. She wanted to eventually open her own practice. She wanted a family. She wanted a partnership that was genuinely mutual. He looked at her across the table with the expression of someone about to bestow insight. He said, I think women your age, no offense, tend to overcomplicate what they actually want. You say you want a partnership, but what you really want is security, which is natural, it's biological. The table was very quiet. She looked at him. He continued, reading her silence apparently as receptive attention, to explain to her, a pediatric occupational therapist with a master's degree who had spent 12 years understanding human development, what women her age fundamentally wanted and why. She let him finish. Then she said pleasantly, I appreciate that perspective. She folded her napkin on the table. I'm going to use the restroom. She went to the restroom. She stood at the sink and looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. Then she texted Tamara. He just explained to me what women my age actually want while looking at me. Tamara responded in 11 seconds. Leave. She went back to the table. She sat down. She decided to try one more time. Not because she expected it to get better, but because she was Imani Brooks and she finished things. The dessert menu arrived. Donovan ordered for her. She had not been asked. She looked at the dessert she had not ordered, a creme brulee she did not want, and felt the specific layered feeling of a woman who is tired. Not tired of this specific man, though she was also that. Tired of the accumulation, tired of the parade of first dates and the ongoing negotiation of her own expectations downward, and the low-grade corrosion of going home from another evening slightly less sure of herself than she had been going in. She paid for her half of the check. She told Donovan she had a good time in the voice she used for endings. She drove home. She sat in her car in her driveway and stared at the steering wheel for 6 minutes. Then she went inside and opened her journal and wrote one word at the top of the page, Donovan. And underneath it, for the first time in 2 years of dating journal entries, she wrote a second thing. I'm done. She deleted the apps on a Friday morning. Not in a moment of drama. She had slept on it. She had talked to Tamara. She had sat with the decision for 3 days. She deleted them with the calm, methodical efficiency of a woman closing tabs she no longer needed. She felt immediately 2 things simultaneously. Relief. The specific relief of putting down something heavy that she had not fully acknowledged was heavy until it was no longer in her hands. And grief. The grief of a 34-year-old woman who wants a partner and a family and is standing in a kitchen on a Friday morning having just closed the doors through which those things were supposed to arrive. She called Tamara. Tamara said, good, now breathe. I'm 34, Imani said. I know. I don't want to be alone. I know. And waiting on God sounds beautiful in theory, but in practice it has produced 41 first dates and a man who ordered my dessert. Tamara was quiet for a moment, then she said, come to church with me Saturday. Imani said, I go to church. Come to mine. Pastor Caldwell is good, I know, but I want you to hear something different. She went to her own church first, Riverside Seventh-day Adventist, the Sabbath morning she had been going to for 8 years. She sat in her regular pew, and she was honest with God for the first time in a while about what she was feeling. Not the polished version of prayer, the version that is correctly formatted and ends at the right place. The actual version. She said, in the interior conversation that is the most real kind of prayer. I am tired. I am trying to trust you, and I am struggling. I know you have a plan, and I know your timing is not my timing, and I am telling you that your timing is frustrating me. She expected to feel better. She did not immediately feel better. She felt heard. These are different things. After the service, Pastor Caldwell stopped her in the fellowship hall, in the way he occasionally did when something in the service had been for a specific person and he wanted to follow up. He said, "How are you, Imani? Honestly?" She told him about the apps, about Donovan, about the Friday morning and the grief in the kitchen. She told him she was tired of waiting and she was trying to trust God, and she was struggling to hold both of those things at the same time. He listened with the full, unhurried attention she had come to rely on over 8 years. Then he said, Proverbs 3:5, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." I've preached that verse 50 times. You know what the hardest part of it is? Which part? The all. He looked at her. It doesn't say trust him with the parts of your life where you can see what he's doing. It says all your heart, including the part that is making its own plan, because the original plan seems to be running behind. He paused. The apps are not wrong. The wanting is not wrong. The frustration is not wrong. But all means something. It means the part of you that is trying to solve this yourself needs to be surrendered to. She drove home thinking about all. She went to Tamara's church the following Saturday, a smaller congregation on the east side of Atlanta that Tamara had joined 2 years ago and loved with a specificity that Imani had noticed and not fully understood until she walked in. It was called Cornerstone Seventh-day Adventist, and the pastor, Pastor Aaron Gibbs, 50, direct and warm in equal measure, was preaching on patience that morning. Not abstract patience, specific, costly, chosen patience. He said, waiting on God is not passive. It is one of the most active things you can do, because every single day you have to choose it again. You have to wake up and decide again that his understanding of your situation is more complete than yours. That his timing accounts for things you cannot see. That the path he is making straight is not the path that looks straightest to you from where you are standing. Imani was taking notes. Here is what I want you to consider, Pastor Gibbs continued. The things you are waiting for, they are not being withheld from you arbitrarily. They are being prepared. The person you will meet has a journey too. They are somewhere right now, becoming the person who will be right for you. God is working on both ends of the equation simultaneously, and the timing is not about your readiness alone. It is about convergence. Imani put her pen down. She thought about that word, convergence. Two paths being prepared, moving toward an intersection that has a specific coordinate in time that belongs to God and not to a dating app algorithm. She thought about Proverbs 3:5. Lean not on your own understanding. Her own understanding said 34 apps, 41 dates, Donovan. God's understanding was apparently more dimensional than that. After the service, Tamara dragged her to the church's monthly community lunch, which Imani had been trying to exit gracefully since the service ended. I have things to do, Imani said. Your things can wait, Tamara said. Eat first. She was standing in the lunch line behind a man she had not noticed come in. She had arrived after the service started, sat near the back, when he turned around to ask the woman behind him if she wanted the last of the cornbread. He was tall. He was kind-looking in the specific way of a face that has been shaped by actual kindness rather than its performance. He was holding a plate of food with the slightly self-conscious air of a person who was also new to this particular social configuration. He looked at Imani. She looked at him. He said, "Do you want the cornbread? There's one piece." She said, "I'm fine, thank you." He nodded. He turned back around. They stood in the lunch line and did not speak again. She found a seat with Tamara and ate, and had a genuinely good conversation with two women from the church, and did not think about the man with the cornbread for the rest of the meal, except for the 3 or 4 times that she did. She drove home. She did not see him again. She told Tamara later that she had noticed a man at the cornbread part of the line. Tamara said with great self-satisfaction, "I know, that's why you needed to come to church with me." Imani said, "Nothing happened, Tamara." "Something is the beginning of something," Tamara said. "That's how something works." 3 weeks later, Imani's car broke down. Not in a dramatic, story-convenient way, in the genuinely irritating way that cars break down, which is on a Tuesday morning when she had a full caseload and no backup plan. She was in the parking lot of a shopping center on Glenwood Avenue, having just realized that her car was not starting. On the phone with roadside assistance being told the wait was 45 minutes. She sat on the curb. A car pulled in near hers, a practical, slightly older model. And the man who got out and walked toward the shopping center was the man from the cornbread line. She recognized him before she had consciously processed the recognition. He did not recognize her. He walked past, then he stopped, not because he recognized her, but because a woman sitting on a curb in a parking lot next to a car with its hood up is a specific image that most decent people do not walk past. He said, "Are you okay?" She looked up at him. She said, "My car won't start. Roadside is 45 minutes out." He said, "I'm a mechanic, was a mechanic, and I work in project management now, but I still know things." He looked at the car. "May I, please?" He looked at the car. He identified the problem in 4 minutes, a battery connection that had come loose, which was a 2-minute fix with the basic tools he kept in his trunk from professional habit. The car started. She stared at the dashboard. She looked at him. He was closing his trunk with the easy competence of someone who is used to fixing things. She said, "You were at Cornerstone 3 weeks ago, cornbread." He turned around. He looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone running a search. "You were in line behind me," he said. "You offered me the last piece. You said you were fine." "I was being polite," she said. "I wanted the cornbread." He laughed, genuine and unguarded, the laugh of someone who was not monitoring his presentation at that moment. She decided on the basis of that laugh to stay in the conversation. His name was Aaron, not the pastor, a different Aaron. Aaron Chambers, 37, originally from Memphis, now in Atlanta for the past 4 years. Project manager for a construction company. Member of Cornerstone for 8 months. Knew enough that he was still learning the rhythms of it, still finding his way into the community. They talked in a parking lot on Glenwood Avenue for 45 minutes. When she finally drove away, she looked in her rearview mirror at the parking lot and thought about a Tuesday morning car battery. She thought about convergence. She thought about 2 paths being prepared. She thought, "God, your timing is inconvenient and it is also exactly right, and I am not sure how you do that, but I am paying attention." Aaron asked for her number before she left the parking lot. He texted that evening, not 17 texts, just one, which said, "I'm glad your battery decided to quit today. Same time, same parking lot, next Tuesday." She stared at the message. She thought about the 41 entries in the journal. She thought about the Friday morning in the kitchen and the grief and the deletion of the apps. She thought about all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and a word, convergence, that she had written in the margin of her church notes and underlined twice. She typed back, "I'll be there, and this time I want the cornbread." She put the phone down and sat in her apartment and felt something she had not felt at the end of a date-adjacent interaction in a very long time. She felt like herself, not a curated version, not the 34-year-old woman managing her expectations downward after another Tuesday with someone who ordered her dessert, just herself, full and unborrowed and unhurried. She picked up her journal. She turned to the page with Donovan at the top and the word "I'm done" underneath it. She turned past it. She opened to a clean page. She wrote the date. She wrote, "God's timing is not slow, it is precise. The problem was never the plan. The problem was I kept trying to run a parallel plan and then wondering why I was exhausted." She closed the journal. She went to the kitchen. She made herself dinner, a real dinner, the kind that took care, the kind her mother made on Sundays. She set the table for one. She sat down and said grace over the plate in front of her. She ate without her phone, which was a practice she had lost somewhere in the 2 years of apps and reclaimed in the 3 weeks since the Friday morning. She was not waiting anymore. She was living, and somewhere in the space between those two things, the path was being made straight. Imani Brooks is a fictional woman, but her journal has real entries in it because millions of people have written versions of them in their own way, in their own lives. The lesson her story carries is this: waiting on God is not the same as doing nothing, and it is not the same as waiting passively while the clock runs out. It is the active, daily, costly choice to trust that the one who made you knows the timing better than you do. The apps were not wrong. The wanting was not wrong. The 41 dates were not wasted. They were the education of a woman learning what she did and did not want, and that education has value. But the parallel plan, the attempt to engineer through relentless effort what God was already preparing, was extracting a cause that showed up in a specific way, Every wrong person she sat across from took a small piece of her sense of her own worth, and the accumulation of that is serious. Here is what Proverbs 3:5 is actually saying in plain language. Your understanding of your own situation is partial. His is complete. The math you are doing in your head does not include all the variables. Trust the one who has all the variables. This does not mean sit down and wait for something to fall from the sky. It means bring your full self, your work, your faith, your community, your genuine living of your actual life, and release the outcome to someone whose timing is not late. It only looks late from inside the partial information. From the full picture, it is always exactly on time. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified about more inspirational stories on redemption and hope.